And one more thing too. I was also got the opportunity to talk about strange, introductions.
Mm-hmm.
Finally got the opportunity to meet Larry Calderon.
From the BPPA,
Boston Police Patrolmen's Association, yes. For those in the audience who don't know.
Yeah.
And the BPPA has had a very controversial relationship with the community, many communities.
Yeah.
And their past, as you know, but once again, speaking for the general public, their past newspaper, the Pax Centurion and all that. And so I had to congratulate him and tip my hat and say, look, I know we're not always going to agree 100% of the time. That's okay. That's big boy stuff, right? But the fact that he has changed the tone and the tenor of that office or organization, changed the tone and the tenor of that organization to become more sober-minded, more thoughtful, not so boisterous and bombastic.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and to that point, not to cut you off, Jamal, the fact that he was present in that room, right? It spoke to because that's something that we have been working with them during my time as president.
And my time as well.
Exactly. Leading up to that, saying, look, because our members, they understood. And what was a big transformation, honestly, was when the Supreme Court changed the laws that says that you don't have to be a member of a union. And they don't have to. Well, before they could take your dues and ignore you. Yeah. And then I started having a conversation because I was president at the time, and I said, "Well, what we're going to do if you guys don't change your representation and how you approach us, we're going to say to our members, you can put your dues in the MAMLEO every week.
Yeah, and we would do what you guys are doing.
We're doing it anyway, right?
We'll make sure that we have the legal counsel and the things that you need. We have that anyway,
right? And but he did get a lot of pushback. He still continues to get a lot of pushback from folks who feel like that he should not acknowledge MAMLEO in the same way as unions and stuff. And he's been very honest with them and said, look, there's a population there that is a large part of our membership. How do we ignore it?
The other side of it, just to show you the growth, when I was the president of MAMLEO, the union and we couldn't even talk on the phone. I have called them, and they hung up on me. And I'm going to be honest, in full disclosure, I did the same thing to them. You know what I mean? Because I just didn't, we didn't see each other the same way, although I was a member of the union. Yeah. But so I knew Larry Calderon from just being a cop.
Yeah, I worked with him.
I worked with him in 11. He worked with my wife in West Roxbury. Yeah. So we were pretty cool. But the fact that he was there representing the union spoke volumes to me.
Exactly. The president, I think that's probably, Jamal, you put probably the first time, because it had gotten to the point where like they would buy a table and then they would donate the tickets back and they wouldn't show up. But I mean they were supported financially, and that was the most you would get out of them. I'm like, okay, that's a start.
But in the right direction.
Not for nothing. With the old crew, you didn't want them there anyway.
Exactly.
They'd have spoiled the fun.
Well, they'd have been passing out the Pax Centurions and they had table, right? We had a little physical. But no, he actually, and I know you got a conversation with him because he spoke to me and said, hey, he wants to come on the broadcast. So clearly he had an impact, and I'm glad it was a positive interaction because we're not painting everyone in the same box, we're not lumping everyone together, and there are some commonalities. Do we agree on everything? No, actually he serves on the Post Commission with me as well.
But he's good people though. I mean he's not a bad brother at all.
No, but he sees it from a different lens, right? He didn't come up in that era there, and he's seen people in a way that a lot of others when they came up, and sadly they're evolving back into that that Trump type of demeanor
and mentality.
Exactly. But yeah, Jamal, you like I said, you guys, like I said, I had no clue at all, of what was going to take place there. I felt like I was at the academy. And then they call you up for another category and you got another award. I'm like, oh wow, okay, what's next? Yeah. But no, but I think what that does for me as well, not the award, but so much is that. Growing up, understanding, I was the youngest of 7. My mom had 8. My oldest brother passed away when he was very young. And the community rallying around us, and food was not something that we had a lot of, but we never went hungry, right? Because if our neighbors had it. So I even though I have done well in life, I feel more of an obligation that if you're in a position to give back and help, you do so. As a matter of fact, you should be receiving a letter, because I told the folks, don't write them to me, is from the Sojourner House there on Rockland Street, the shelter for homeless families. I've been dropping food to them. It's, you know, when you pull up and a kid is asking you if you have any bananas today, you know, and they're just excited.
I mean, but I used to be that kid, man.
Yeah.
I used to be that kid.
You know, and you know that you already have those things in your home. You know, things we kind of take for granted because it becomes automatic. And I think Jamal doesn't get the recognition that he deserves, because he was doing this before this thing, with, you know, when he was going in his own pocket, and still in a lot of ways is going into his own pocket, you know, driving out there with his own personal vehicle at an expense, you know. So people, this is why I said, man, we have to not just, you know, give out things just for the sake of giving them. Like, you know, a lot of times you say, okay, then you start trying to, well, what did they really do? Oh, they got a title, so that entitles them to. But the people that are actually doing the work, like Jamal, or rather, I thank you, I appreciate you, I love you, my brother.
Yes, sir. Love you too.
You know,
and you know, it's funny too. Some of the people who didn't get an award that night, like I noticed, Officer Grubbs didn't get an award, so he came dressed like one.
He sure did. Listen, I don't think I've ever seen Kenny Grubbs in something that wasn't flamboyant when it comes to these events. I mean, Kenny is. You remember that commercial, Toys R Us? Is I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us. That is Kenny. That has been Kenny Grubbs since I've known him.
I've seen that man dancing. He still does, I think, Santa Claus for Christmas.
Yes,
all this stuff. Well, that boy is
he's a mess.
Bundle of energy, and you know, he got the spirit of life in him.
Oh my God,
it's a trip. And then I seen Larry Van Zant over there with looking like the Pharaoh of Egypt with all that gold on. Looking like Tutankhamun.
Well, I didn't even notice Larry. Larry, I went by. I was like, Larry, you don't know who this is? He goes, oh my God, Willie. Yeah. I have seen. I mean, you're dressed up. I was like, Larry, please, man.
I know it's funny. You see people in the clothing that you don't like. Even Sophia Hall from the Lawyers. I didn't know she had a child. I haven't spoken to her in a while, but she is a phenomenal attorney. She's the one that took a lot of this litigation. Well-deserved award for her and the folks there. Matter of fact, the Lawyers Committee is celebrating their 55. They were established the same year as MAMLEO.
Okay.
So when we did,
not for nothing, the Last Poets, same year. You know, a lot of stuff inspired that year. You know, the assassination of Malcolm and all that stuff. A lot of black organizations, this was their year of formation because people was like, man, we got to do something. We fed up.
But see, that brings up a very good point, Jamal, because with all of those things, we're now working in silos where before we had a common theme and we worked together. That doesn't seem to be the theme of the day any longer. How do we get back to that? Or can we?
Well, you know what it is really? It's about increasing our numbers because some of us do work well together. It's like we're like a small church. You know, the Church of Ye Old Faithful, right? Mm-hmm. But now what we got to do is we got to get more members, right? And that's what it is. Because some of us, like, once again, to our example, we work great together.
Right.
Y'all have a good relationship with the Lawyers Committee and all that. But if we were as, let's say, popular as some of these other organizations that seem to get a lot of attention but produce very limited results. I mean, like, if you look at the track record of MAMLEO, for instance, you know, from the stuff that you guys have done on the philanthropic side, to, you know, the law cases. I mean, you just won. You know,
$40 million.
And I think I just said that. That was another one of my little shtick lines I didn't get a chance to do. But while people was talking about defunding the police, defund the police, and then the state ended up having to refund the police.
I like that. I'm gonna steal that from you. But you're right. But see, this comes to, you know, what I was taught under the tutelage. I came up under John Wells, Billy Celester, and those folks, and there seems to be a little distance between the young officers because there were some in the room, but not as much. Like you said, you saw a lot of the older retirees. That next generation, it concerns me. Jeff Lopes, Dr. Jeffrey Lopes, gives me hope because he's a young man that they will continue in. But it has been very difficult to find people to come in and replace the leadership who actually want to carry out the mission and not see it as a catapult for themselves for some personal gain.
But I also think that the time is different.
It definitely is.
I think the sense of urgency is different. During the time of the creation of MAMLEO, that year, the 68 years, 64 to 70, that time frame, because we had lost so many fighters, so many civil rights fighters. Because just due to the fact that folks saw that if we don't take these people out, we're going to lose what we have.
Right.
So the time has changed in the sense of how that message was in our music, that message was in our community.
Right.
That message is no longer there. The people with the money have eradicated that message by eradicating that particular segment of entertainment and kind of merging everything together so that you don't have that distinctive black message.
Well, let me say this. I want to get your take on this, Jamal. I think that sense of urgency is here today, and I know that's not what you're saying. It's not, because I think back then we knew about it, but we couldn't really voice our opinions in a way that we can today. We didn't have laws and things like that, and we're seeing those things eroding, right? And they always say, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And all the signs are there that we're regressing, and you look at the laws that people want to change, and you can't read about books about black people or certain things. So I don't see the sense of urgency from this generation saying that they have learned our lesson and they don't want to learn it the hard way, because a lot of what we've had to do at MAMLEO was, on all honesty, is we took our foot off the gas. We said, Billy and them had taken care of all this, right? All the lawsuits they had filed of discrimination and things of that nature. I was like, because I remember saying to Charlie Dickerson one day, I'm like, man, I'm so glad you all took care of all these problems. My career is going to be a smooth sail. Not, because once those lawsuits they had filed expired, there was no commitment from the other side to do anything except wait for you to file the next one.
But see, that's my point. So I think that people have to understand that when you go into the court of law and you win that court, you win that case, that particular case create a dam. A dam, it stops the dam of stupidity, the flow of stupidity from actually continuing. But once that dam has been released, because a good example of that would be the consent decree.
Exactly.
Once it has been released, you're right back to where you started.
Right.
That doesn't mean the water has dissipated.
Right.
The water just building up.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that's what I'm saying about the sense of urgency not being there.
Right. And the reason why I say that, Jamal, is because every year we're in an election cycle. There's an election every year, and I'm looking at the lack of participation and the lack of, honestly, viable candidates that are in some of these races. This year we have a city council race, and I'm saying to myself, folks should be, look, we look at what's happening here in the city, around the state, around the country. There's no sense of urgency that our situation is not going to get any better, and we're not looking to put people in place like back then who were actually advocates, like a Councilor Yancey type of style, right? Of Bill Owens, of that nature. We don't have them, and I don't see them on the horizon being supported. I shouldn't say we don't have them, but they're not being supported in a meaningful way that encourages people to get into the fight. Because I tell you, when I went looking to trying to find someone to replace Eddie, as Eddie stepped down, and Eddie was gracious enough to come into MAMLEO for a while, Jeff is going to have a very difficult time trying to find somebody to come in there and replace him at the caliber of the work that he's doing. Jamal, I want to get your take on that.
Well, first of all, I know when y'all finally, get to building that building, I know that Eddie's going to help y'all save a lot of money. You won't need a crane. He's just going to lift the doggone girders up and put them in place.
Right.
Looking like a doggone power lifter. But, in terms of our people, we have, just as a society, like what they said, first of all, if white America has, a cold, then black America has a pneumonia, right?
Yep.
And then if you remember years ago, that whole thing, the dumbing down of America, right? So society itself, just in general, American society has deteriorated so much, like just from the time when I was a kid. We went from kind of thoughtful things like Donahue, right? and Tom Brokaw, that type of journalism, to Jerry Springer and Ricky Lake
and Maury Povich, right? Not
Maury
who
Povich.
Your parents are, right?
Right, and that happened in a quick, that might have been, that transition was like a decade, and it was like out with the old, in with the new. But the new, what they say is now new and improved, is actually garbage.
Right.
So if you look at the content of the food nowadays, orange juice don't even taste like oranges no more. If you look at the quality of the music from back in the day, we're going to compare like the Temptations to, I don't know, Migos or somebody. I don't know. So everything has deteriorated to a level, and then when it's time for us to reach more people to get involved in something that's meaningful,
right?
The problem is we're competing with a level of distraction that was never there before. So back in the civil rights days, for instance, there were no cell phones, there was no YouTube, there was no, video games, certainly there were concerts, but, the famous people at that time, like Martin Luther King, famous like James Brown, famous, now, but who do we have?
Right. No, to your point, and Dr. Bradley brought it up, is that even in their music, and when you said that, it made me think in their messaging, right? Marvin Gaye, and there was a message in there for us. James Brown, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. There was a messaging. You don't really see, and what you hear now, I can't even say in front of my kids a lot of this stuff in the language that is used, right?
And so not to cut you off.
Uplifting, yeah.
So why is that the case? Where did that music go? Where did the writing go? I mean, because people, they're writing the songs, but are those songs been financed? Who's financing that?
That's a great question, because remember we had this conversation. You may not remember. It was a while back when BET was bought out by, and the first thing they got rid of was the news.
The black news,
right?
And why? And because of the fact of the education component,
right?
And the sense of
more
pride.
Entertaining,
yes,
right? More videos, right?
Yes.
And I'm saying to myself, well, you don't think we need to be educated, right? So, how do you call yourself black? I guess black entertainment television, but you remove the news from pretty much the only source that we had that you could get 30 minutes of news about things that were happening, voting, things like that. So the lack of informant in education, the Boston Public Schools is a perfect example.
Well, you're right. It's a perfect example. Don't just hit my mind. Do you pay? Well, we all pay for television now. In the past, we used to. You get it for free. Right? It was free channels. You got it for free. Have you ever noticed the History Channel? There's no history on the History Channel.
No, I know. Yeah,
exactly. Think about that.
Right, they're new programming. Exactly.
There's no history.
You know what the History Channel is? Bigfoot, aliens, and Hitler.
Yeah,
right. Hitler.
They be playing something about Hitler. I know more. I know what he ate for breakfast. He died. He might not be dead. He might be in. It might be in South America.
It's crazy. There's nothing about it, and the reason why is because they want to keep you dumbed down.
Right. But part of that also is a conscientious choice, right? Because it's like when you guys were talking, I think remembering going in the grocery store with my mom, because I was the youngest. I always had to go with her. She wasn't leaving me with anyone, and I saw how she shopped. We didn't spend any time in the frozen food section or gone down the aisles with the cans and stuff, right? So I cooked from scratch. And when I go in stores and I'm looking and I'm like, man, this is not cooking, right? I mean, everything that a lot of these people, it's in a box, right? It's frozen, it's processed, right? It's loaded with salt and stuff. So a lot of the health problems that we have are diet related.
Well, we don't decide. When I say we, I mean the community, the black community, all right, and the other community of colors. We don't decide what we eat and what we wear.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. We may go in and pick among the worst. You know what I mean? Because we get the worst of everything. We don't decide what we're going to get. And so that is the issue. We don't have that
even
control.
with that, and I'm glad to see that they've expanded. I don't know if you're aware of it, Jamal. The Daily Table, they now have a location in Mattapan on River Street in that new apartment complex there, and they have one on Washington Street and one in Nubian Square, Dudley, whoever you want to call it. But it's a healthy alternative. But I got to be honest with you, and maybe I'm missing the times that it's busy, Jamal, because I don't see a lot of people in that store, and it has more of a healthier choice than this processed food at some of these other.
You are what you eat, brother. So if you're not eating healthy, guess what's going to happen?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And when you were talking about going and shopping with your mom, I used to do the same. You know, and it amazes me how good my mother was at picking what she needed to make sure that we were healthy. But one of the areas that I used to always kind of gravitate towards, and I'm going to be very honest with you, full disclosure, the cookie area.
Oh, listen, what child didn't? What child didn't?
I went to the cookie area, man.
Yeah,
I used to lobby my mom, like, Mom, can we buy this?
Yes, but that was a treat every now and then because the cost associated with that. It's like now there's a big flare up, Jamal, and I'm gonna get you guys a chocolate milk in the schools, right? So kids be, and they say, well, they get the calcium, but also they're getting a whole lot of sugar.
A whole lot of sugar.
And we wonder why these kids are diabetic by the time they graduate from kindergarten.
On the food tip, Larry, and you and I see this based on what we do with the food thing every Sunday. One thing I will also say, talking about these societal differences, the dumbing down of America and whatnot, we also have to look at the growing, particularly Boston that we live in, where now we have so many people from so many different places.
Yeah,
cultures. When I was growing up, it was basically, a Puerto Rican. Wasn't even really too many Dominicans here when I was growing up. They came later. The Puerto Ricans, Cape Verdeans, Haitians.
Yeah, Jamaicans were kind of here first, and then Haitian population started to increase.
Exactly. So now, like you just said about Daily Table up in Madison Square. But if you go into what used to be the farmers market up there, what is it now? That's an American food basket.
Right, exactly, yeah.
What you will notice is most of our people, to your point, we going in there getting the frozen foods and this and that. Most of the people who are from the islands or the Asian community or the Latin community, they are in those other aisles getting the fresh vegetables, the roots, the yuca, the batata, all these type of things. We avoiding it like the plague. And as you see, and when we give out that food, because as Larry could tell you, we get everything from sometimes the meats we get, sometimes it be filet mignon steaks in there. Okay? No lie. It be big old pieces of salmon in there, big old pieces of pollock in there. And then we also get every sort of vegetable and fruit you can imagine.
Stuff I don't even know what it is. We be sometimes like, what is that?
What is that? And I have literally seen our people, Black Americans primarily, push that stuff to the side to get to the they call the good stuff, and they don't want the vegetables. There's been times when I've had boxes with only vegetables, and people have just said, "Man, I don't want that stuff."
Right, because that means they got to cook, right? Not throw it in the microwave. That's what I'm saying. It's like I go to the grocery store and I get like Dr. Bradley's a great cook as well. I get me some fresh collard greens. I was standing in line one day and there was a white woman behind me. She's like, excuse me, I've been trying. How do you cook those? It's because people don't really. Also, I can stretch my budget better, believe it or not, buying fresh than the frozen. It costs you more to buy that stuff that somebody has to prepare.
Now, you said a white woman asked you how to cook collard greens in the grocery store?
Yes.
Now, Larry, I hope you didn't give up the secret. I hope you told her a lie to put a slice of watermelon in it.
Only you would come up with that. Hey, I might try. Shoot, that might be a good idea. Sweeten it up a little bit. You might be on to something there. But this is why, like when I first met my wife. Now, her mom is an excellent cook. But the one thing that I, when I went to their home for Thanksgiving for the first time, and they brought out. Everything was great, but they brought out the cornbread. And I bit into it, and I'm like, this don't taste like the cornbread I'm used to, right? Because my mom would make it from scratch. You get that cast iron skillet, and you could put nothing in that but cornbread, right? And I remember she would put it in the oven with a little oil in there to get it hot, so that when she put the cornbread in there, the crust would start already from the heat from it in there. And that's still how I do mine, right? And cornmeal stuff. And I asked her mom, I said, how'd you make? She brought out the box of Jiffy. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is cake. This is not cornbread. But it's it says corn muffin. But I'm saying is that, and then because my wife is a health person, and so I said to her, I said, I can't believe you eat this. She said, yeah, we was raised on it. I said, have you ever looked at the ingredients on the side of this box? The first one was lard. And after that, I couldn't pronounce any other. I say this because my daughters would not touch it, because in my house if we have cornbread, it's cornbread.
Yeah.
It's cornbread.
They're used to a certain taste.
It's in that same
texture.
skillet that my grandmother passed down to my mom, that my mom passed down to me, and my daughters will get it. And I'm in the kitchen with them cooking, and I'm watching them, and it reminds me of my time
With your mom.
Yeah, but they're getting healthy habits here, gentlemen, and that's the point. That's like, but I see kids now, they can go into the store with their parents' car EB, because back then, my mom had a little hard time. We had food stamps. I did not want nobody to see me with that book of food stamps, right? Because you got to take the whole book.
Yeah.
You couldn't tear it out except for the dollar ones.
Yeah,
Were the only ones they would allow you to bring in a single one, right?
Yeah.
Everything else had to be still in the book, and the guy had to rip it out in the store.
Yeah, and right in front of everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I hear you.
It was not something, but now, Jamal, there doesn't seem to be that sense of pride, of standing on your own 2 feet that people are comfortable with. As long and like I said, you're right. In some ways, picky about free. I said, what part of free you're not comprehending?
And not for nothing too. Once again, back to the distractions. So we have people out there who are struggling, got food stamps, but their kid has on Jordan.
Oh yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
And so a lot of these people, it's not about them not having the money. It's about how they prioritize and they budget. I mean, here's another thing that was lost along with the art of writing a letter. Is saving. Remember back then, everybody used to put a little something away. Put a little something away. Put a little something away. But the art of saving is gone. Now it's just spend, baby, spend. Blow it.
And
you know what I mean?
You guys are really bringing back some really good memories. You're right. I remember when I got my first summer job. Actually, when I got my first job in high school, my mom made me open up a bank account. And every week I had to put money in there. I had to show her remember the bank books?
Absolutely.
Right? I had to show her my bank book on where that money went in there. It wasn't for her. It was, and it taught me about investing, because I thought too, I had this misconception that I was going to get rich after I made a deposit. They were going to double it every week. Didn't realize that the bank is not really a good place for you to make money.
Nope. They didn't say how much you have to pay. They just say they have to pay you something.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's
exactly.
Not, but you can be your own bank and make much more.
Well, that's where I am forever grateful to Charlie Dickinson, who turned me on to real estate. Because, like I said, and my mom rented. She had 7 kids. She was never going to save enough for a down payment on a house.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to buy her a home. But that also is how I know that my children will have a leg up, right? Because remember when they came out with that study about black worth in Boston being $8 and $247,000 for other people, and we knew, like Jamal, your grandmother, the house, I think you guys recently sold the house that you grew up in, at your grandmother's house, right? And think about when she paid for that. But if you guys had been renting all that time, there would have been no return on that investment. It wasn't even an investment, right? It was just money going out. And
absolutely, I just wish we would have never sold it.
Right, but even to that point, at least you guys were able to take something away from it, right? Where most people, when they leave out of someone else's home, all they can take is their personal belongings.
Right.
And so
but then again, Larry, in all fairness to the people, the generations before us, that was what they had.
Right.
You know what I mean? They had to. That renting was it. You know what I mean?
You're bringing it home, brother. Nothing you're saying I dispute, but they also said that they wanted better. That's why you're Dr. Bradley today, right?
I agree.
That's what I'm saying, is that there was a purposefulness that the next generation would do better.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing it to regressing, right? Like, I had to go to school during busing, right? I should be dumb as a rock. But there was support, like, no, you're going to get an education, even if that's what it takes. Where now kids can walk into any school and look at the deficiencies in the education and the learning, the lack of learning. That's
Larry, forget about walking to any school. Any kid in their hand has a Star Trek computer that they can literally ask anything. But what do they ask it? They ask it, what did Kim Kardashian eat for breakfast? Where is Kanye right now? So, I mean, it's not just now the schools. I mean, okay, I'll give you another thing. When I was a kid, y'all were talking about little treats and stuff. Back when I was a kid, you know what was a treat? To go to the library.
Yeah, I remember when I got my library card. You're right. Yeah, that was a big thing.
It was like going to the museum or the aquarium or something like that. It was like, yo, we're gonna go to the library. And when I found out the library, like you can rent not just books, but like you can loan out like records and stuff like that. They had records, and then when VCR tapes came out, they had VCR tapes and stuff. You know, as a kid, it was like Netflix before Netflix.
Right.
You know, it was Blockbuster Video, and it was free.
Exactly.
Free videos. So all this type of stuff that people just have got away from. You go into the libraries now, there'll be some old people, whatever. You know, maybe a school might come in.
And the sad part is that the kids that are usually now it's just disruptive behavior. Is the reason they're in there.
Well, with this thing, the library can come to you.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to go to it.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's what I mean.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So it's there's a whole different social aspect to that that's no longer there. Because one of the things that you did have at the library, they had those discussions where you were reading something and you're reading something out at the checkout counter. You know, you can get into discussions about this book or that book or this situation. So you had that human bonding that you no longer have.
Well, and to that point, right, we've only got a couple of minutes. A lot of times your school projects required you going to the library to do that research, like you said, what you can do now with this electronic device, right? So I don't, even with that,
that's
good.
And that's what I'm saying. See, it's not the accessibility. Now we have greater accessibility than we ever have in the history of man. It's the focus. We've been distracted now.
Right.
So now, once again, people are more concerned about Kim Kardashian than they are the great philosophers or ancient African history or anything, current politics or geopolitics or whatever. They don't care about that. They care about Kim Kardashian and her big booty.
Or the other side of that is that they're more concerned about Kim Kardashian and all those folks than they are about someone telling you can't learn about your own history.
Right.
I'm taking away your books. I'm taking away everything about you and your contribution to America. And no one's crying. I'm like, wait a second. No one's out. This should be protests. Like I said, I am not going to Florida.
Same here.
You know, that's my protest.
You know,
we all can do something on this.
In Florida, the governor, Goofy has taken on Mickey Mouse because that's what I consider to say.
Yeah, I was like, are you kidding me? Yeah. And no one, you know, this is just like they're just brushing over this in the news.
Yeah,
you know, do you understand what he's saying? He's saying, I don't want you to learn about you.
But not only is he saying it, but there's millions of people that agree because you know it wouldn't be happening if folks weren't standing by watching it and like so they're coming.
And what's the other one that? The other one that banned Sesame Street now. He wants to get rid of Sesame Street.
Oh, man.
See?
Are you serious?
Yeah, see,
because
Big Bird, I mean, he's attacking Big Bird.
Yeah, because they have good gay
LGBTQ characters now. And
Asian characters. What they have is a representation of the country, whether you agree with that or not.
Exactly. The people are here. They're making contributions.
And people that sometimes have been living in the shadow, they're saying, hey, you know what? I'm a human being. It may not be your choice, but you living your life as long as you're not bothering children and you're consenting adults. Yeah. It's not my problem. It's not my issue.
Amen.
To deal with that. Well, Jamal, we got a chorus actually coming in to see Dr. Bradley Lighter. I didn't want to tell him I didn't want to get him out of that seat, but he's already dropped his headphones.
Well, you know, man, I'm telling you something. You can have my seat.
Yeah, I'm sure. So there'll be 3 seats here. So if you're in the neighborhood, stop by, Jamal. Dr. Bradley won't be sitting in his chair for the next hour.
You can have my chair, Jamal.
but not his sandwich. Hey, keep listening. Matter of fact, call back because they actually have some grants that they're going to be talking about that are available and actually for some of the work that you're doing, you know, feeding families and stuff. And actually, you know what? Hey, you qualify for your gas that you're spending every day. That is a legitimate expense. So tune in and call in because he said you should be able to receive some of that to help offset some of your costs there, brother.
Absolutely. And I hope the next hour after that we get to talk about some of the politics and the news.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, brother. Definitely.
Peace.
Okay.
Yep. Peace out, bro.
Right. You've been listening to At the Round Table with MAMLEO. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back.
Laura's here?